When several states disagree over the meaning of the Constitution, that gets the Supreme Court's attention, and everyone is appealing the decisions whether they were for or against Trump. So I expect them to formally take the case in the coming weeks, and I think they will go one of two routes. One would be to say the 14th Amendment says if you engage in an insurrection of the United States, it was passed after the Civil War. This was to rationalize what would happen after that. And it said people who engage in insurrection or rebellion against the United States cannot serve at high office of the land. Trump is the first president to be cited for this in American history. There was a state officer in New Mexico who participated in the January 6th riot in the Capitol. He was removed from office in New Mexico under the 14th Amendment. So it is alive and it is being applied. So the court could go one of two ways. They could say, we think that it needs a process where all the states can weigh this issue equally. And I think they will say, you can't remove someone for insurrection against the United States unless they were convicted of insurrection. And Donald Trump has not been convicted. The other road they might take is to say, we have several states with different interpretations. The states are supreme in how they run their elections, including federal elections. If a state wants to say that Trump is violated the 14th Amendment and is not eligible to serve, they can say that. If they want to say he didn't do it and should be on the ballot, they can say that. That's what they did with abortion rights last year in America. Leave it to the states to decide. So one of those two roads will probably be taken in the weeks ahead.
And what impact could this have politically?
It's already having a huge impact politically. This has completely jolted everything. Among Republicans, they say, here's another example of a conspiracy of the Biden administration, the Democrats, and the deep state to throw Trump off the ballot. And they're really angry about it. So Trump, if you thought Trump had strong support in the Republican Party before this is amped up to a new level. But the other argument that's really coming through is the courts shouldn't decide who is on the ballot in the United States. The voters should decide who they want for president. And I think even some Democrats are afraid of the Republican counter-reaction and how emotional it is and how much of a punch it carries. Even a lot of Democrats are saying the courts should not throw Trump off the ballot. If we want to throw him off out of the presidency, we should vote that way, not rely on a court decision.
Would you say this underscores the ongoing tension in the US around the democracy and its rule of law?
Yes, it is. It just shows how divided it is, how everything becomes politicized, and with Trump, just how much emotion as well as politics translates into everyday political activity. We have 4 primaries coming up for the Republicans in January and February. That could decide the Republican nomination by the end of February. And Trump is ready to take that nomination, and he wants to use what's happening to him legally as a weapon to win his renomination and maybe the path back to the White House.
This is one of many legal matters that surround Trump. There's also criminal and civil cases. Support doesn't seem to be waning. If anything, it seems to be emboldening.
It's increasing, and the Supreme Court is going to rule on more issues. Trump, when he was president, is he immune from criminal prosecution for anything that he did as president? That's at the heart of the case in Washington, D.C. as to whether he tried to overturn the election. The Supreme Court is going to rule on that issue. So we're going to have these court decisions shape the contours of the political campaign in the months ahead. It's not going to be legal, it's going to be political.
And what about the Republican nomination? Does Nikki Haley have a shot, or is it looking like it's going to...
You know, we were talking about the Civil War, and she got in trouble in the past 24 hours in discussing the Civil War, and she was asked about what caused the Civil War, and she didn't mention slavery. This is the first hiccup that she's had, speed bump that she's had in her rise inside Republican ranks, and I think it really hurt her. And I think that it hurt her with moderates who wanted to vote for her. But if you have a position where you don't discuss slavery in the context of the Civil War, you kind of turn off some voters. So I think Trump wants to absolutely beat her in Iowa and stop her in New Hampshire and stop her in her home state of South Carolina. I think Trump has an excellent chance of doing that. So she has a lot of work to do if she wants to catch up with Trump. I think it's uphill.
And how do Democrats feel about the court cases going on surrounding Trump, but also Biden's campaign?
With Biden's campaign, I think Democrats are worried. You have a president, they believe the president has a great record, that he's done a really good job. But they look at the polls and they look especially at the enthusiasm of voting groups for Biden, and especially among young voters. They are who were so decisive in 2020 in voting for Biden. They are not expressing any enthusiasm for him, so Democrats are quite worried. Biden wants to run against Trump, and he believes he can beat him. But and I think, given the trajectory of Republican politics, I think Trump will do very well.
And this, Colorado and Maine aren't the only states that are considering whether or not Trump is eligible, but most of those lawsuits are making their way through the courts. Maine was different. Can you expand on that?
Well, it's the Secretary of State that decides whether to put someone on the ballot, and so a court they convene a civil proceeding in which to hear evidence where the Secretary of State can make a judgment, but it is ultimately not a political decision. It is ultimately will be approved by. It will come to the Supreme Court for a decision one way or the other.
When do we expect that?
I expect in the coming week. I think by the end of January we'll have some pretty good guidance on this.
Bruce Wolpe, thank you for your time.
Thank you.